How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Geno's Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We are mock drafting. I'm here with my boy Mark Barber. We're doing a Bangers Cats draft. Let's kick this baby off in 1 minute. Let's go. I'm a little rusty on the drops. My bad, guys. Mark, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. Second mock draft of the year, and it's July 22nd. So there you go. Doing all right. How about you?
This is number one for me. I'm working through my projections. I'm keeping pace with Nate actually pretty well, but I'm not. I haven't finished them yet, so I am not essentially. I mean, not really using them other than the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So this should be pretty interesting. We're diving into this. It's unfamiliar territory for Mark. He doesn't typically do a Bangers Cats League. So, are you still excited about this, Mark?
It's gonna be different. This is a world where Mackenzie Weegar is as valuable as Connor McDavid, and that's a strange world. I don't often live in that world, but I'm happy to visit it for a night in July.
Absolutely. All right. So, in terms of scoring settings, for skaters, we've got goals, assists, shots on goal, hits, and blocks. And for goalie stats, we have saves, save percentage, and wins. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Not doing power play points. They're not factored into Mark's projections, so we're not doing power play points this time. So that it does kind of change the. I think I wonder if maybe. So I'm looking when I order the ranks here. I wonder if that's partially why so many defensemen are kind of pushing their way to the top, or guys that maybe aren't crazy on power play points. But that's okay. It's going to be fun. This is going to be this is going to be very interesting.
I
Uh,
think it's kind of interesting because it's essentially, well, setting aside the goalies, but for the skaters, it's essentially the same scoring as the points league mocks that we often do, and so it's just an interesting experiment to see how the value changes based on the league format. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting.
all right, I'm changing the orientation here of the stream because Nate's saying that he can't see something on there. So Nate, just let me know. Let me know if that looks better. All right. So one other thing that we are doing is Dauber Hockey has given away some of their Dauber Hockey draft packages. So that includes the Dauber Prospects Report. That includes the general fantasy hockey draft guide when it comes out. And I Nate's saying this is still you still can't really see it, but let's try something different here. Do 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 do. Okay. Nate, how does it look now? I'm gonna go full screen here. I mean, it looks fine to me from what I can see, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, we're just gonna keep rolling. So, Mark and I have picked a player to be drafted. That whoever picks this player, whoever in the draft picks this player, they are going to win the Dauber hockey package. We're not going to tell you who it is, but once they are picked, it's going to kind of be like the daily double on Jeopardy. We're going to be like, you win. That's not really how the daily double works, but yeah, it's okay. We can't see the 12 spot. That's the issue here. So let's just zoom out a little bit. How about that? There we go. How's that, guys? Is that better? I misunderstood I misunderstood the instructions here. All right, we're going. Mark, I'm gonna throw to you because you have pick number 6. So what is your thought process right now? It's probably just seeing whoever's left after the first few picks.
Yeah, pretty much going to be guaranteed to get somebody that I like sitting in the sixth spot. I do have my projections. You alluded to the fact that I don't normally do cats leagues, and we're tailoring this to my projections. I did actually have to go and create new projections for cats leagues, and so I did that. I'm ready to go. It is a little bit different because in cats leagues you need to find a way to normalize all of the different stats. Obviously, you've got like one goal for 10 shots, and so you can't just sort of count them. You need to find some way to normalize it.
Mm-hmm.
I use Z scores to do that, and all right, here we go. And I've got my projections, and the top of my list right now, I've got Brady Kachuk. That is obviously a great player to have in a Bangers Cats league. Next up, though, is David Pasternak. I'm tempted to go with Kachuk just because he covers all the categories, but I think in this particular case, Pasternak has the right wing, which I do like. I think I gotta go Pasternak.
All right. I mean I am gonna go Brady Kachuk. He fills all the stat categories. He is at the top of my mental my just my mental ranks right now. Obviously I'm kind of going in blind as I mentioned, but we're gonna go Brady Kachuk. He does a little bit of everything, and I'm pretty high on him here. Like to get a lot of those. I like to target. Blake's talked about this in the past, and I have a similar philosophy. I like trying to target goals and shots because those are the hardest to come by in terms of streaming. Obviously, hits and blocks. They're pretty easy to stream. You can just pick up, I don't know, rando defenseman Brendan Dillon or somebody like that for a week when he has a good schedule, and you end up being able to fill those hits and blocks or supplement the hits and blocks a little bit better. But goals and shots are a little bit tougher to come by. Brady Kachuk does a little bit of everything, as I mentioned, and it gets you a bit of a head start on the hits as well. So Mikko Rantanen goes next. Obviously, it's going to be a challenge to try and decide what to do at this point. Let's look and see if there's any comments here. So I think that we're the sound is still on. I thought that the draft room sound was turned all the way down. There we go. I think we got it now. Perfect. How's that? I think I probably just didn't refresh the I probably just didn't refresh the stream. So the Future Gadget Lab says, I know it's not the best format, but would love a breakdown on how categories draft goes different from points and just the big pitfalls to avoid. So, I mean, in general, at least off the top, it is a little bit. The order is usually fairly similar. You see guys like Brady obviously go a little bit higher. JT Miller, as he went at pick 10, would go slightly higher. But at this point in the draft, it's usually relatively the same. Jack Hughes would go a little bit lower just because he gets the shots, he gets the goals. I mean, and in this league, no power play points included. But he doesn't really do hits and blocks so much. So he kind of falls a little bit further than he normally would in a points league. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, my rule of thumb is I like to just try and get players that have a decent peripheral floor, just kind of across the board, just so that I have a little bit of everything, and then I can kind of supplement things that are maybe a little bit lacking. But obviously, focusing on goals and shots, like I mentioned before. But yeah, I mean, players like I typically stay away from players like a Mitch Marner, I mean, historically, Artemi Panarin, although he kind of changed his style of play this year, where he became more of a shot first guy. So he's a lot more interesting to me this year. Guys like that are big playmakers, but don't necessarily fill all the other stat categories. Those aren't guys that I'm typically that interested in. I like guys that do at least a little bit of a bunch of things. Um, we've got Dahlin and Makar around the turn. Artemi Panarin goes. A little bit of vocal coaching on my part there, but that is a pretty good spot for Panarin in my opinion, even in a bangers cats. Roman Yossi at 2-4. Face off ninjas here. I'm coming up next. I should probably add some guys to my queue here, but I have a couple of people in mind. Face off ninja is about to pick here. He got Mikko Rantanen with his first pick, and I'm pretty into that. But I have a couple of guys that I really like at this spot, so I'm gonna throw them in my queue right now. Philip Forsberg was the guy I was going to go with. Face of Ninja steals him. Don't really love that, but I'm looking at I mean, a few different guys. I've got Timo Meyer in my queue, William Nylander. I think that's a decent spot for him to go. He's got dual eligibility, gets shots, he gets goals. Timo Meyer, another guy that does a little bit of everything, but I think I'm going to go with William Nylander. I think his ceiling is a little bit higher in terms of points. So that's what I'm going to go with. William Nylander, baby. Mark, I'm going to throw it over to you. You are on the clock.
All right. Well, I've got some center only players at the top of my queue. I'm kind of hesitant to take them if I can help it. I think given the time I've got left here, I've got a real decision between two players, Jake Gensel and Elias Pettersson. Jake Gensel, my projections think that he should score a few more goals next year, but have quite a few fewer assists. But he still provides value in this format, so I think I'm just going to take Jake Gensel here.
Oh, interesting, Jake Gensel. I love it. So, what are your thoughts? What's your feeling on Tampa Bay and that power play this year? I have this opinion about, and I think you guys may have talked about it on one of the prior mock drafts that you streamed. But I have this thought about how Jake Gensel's a left shot. They've always had Steven Stamkos as a threat as that right shot on the left side on that power play. Do you think that Gensel's handedness will affect the way that Tampa Bay power play runs? Because Stamkos has been such a weapon and such a staple on that power play for so long.
Well, it's going to be different, no question. I'm sort of blindly optimistic that the quality of the players are just going to find a way to make it work. I mean, Kuznetsov is Kucherov is pretty fantastic when it comes to playmaking. I just have to think that him and Gensel will find a way to make it work. I do think Gensel is probably a better player than Stamkos at this point, and so I'm optimistic. Obviously, I have no direct data to base that on, but I'm pretty hopeful that it's all going to work out there in Tampa Bay.
It is relatively subjective. I do just want to interrupt and say Dream Killer is the winner of the Dauber Hockey Fantasy Guide package. I can't remember the exact name of it, but that's what it is. So I am Dream Killer. I'm going to DM you in the in the Discord, and you are the winner. Mackenzie Weegar was the player that we picked beforehand. He's a bangers cats monster. Mark said before the stream started, you get Mackenzie Weegar, and he's just an absolute bangers cats monster. Do you think he's getting power play 1 here in Calgary for the full season, Mark?
That's certainly a possibility, but I don't think I'd want to bet on it. I mean, they've been willing to give Rasmus Anderson a chance from time to time, and so I expect that we'll probably see a little bit of that. But Weegar will probably get his chances too. So I'm sure he'll be pretty valuable this year. I didn't quite have him ranked that high, but I mean, in terms of defensemen, he's one of the best that you can get in this format, obviously. And I'm already
You're
back on the
back up.
clock. So I still have a bunch of center only players sitting at the top of my queue. Uh, I think I'm going to pass on them just to go with a dual eligible left wing, right wing player. I'm going to do something that on the last pod I said I wouldn't do, which is take a player from Carolina who is not Sebastian Aho. But dual eligible Svechnikov is on my team.
Yeah, man, I think that's a good pick at this point in the draft. He does another guy that does a little bit of everything. I think they are a little more top heavy than they have been in previous years. So I feel like he's going to potentially get a little bit more time. I'm on the clock again. I'm going to go with Timo Meier. I almost would have taken him in the last round, but I'm going to go with him. I've got a couple major bangers, cats, monsters here with Kachuk and Timo Meier. To start off the draft, I'm not upset with that. Going with wings to start things off. Another thing that I typically do, and I don't know about you, Mark. You can tell me kind of what your strategy is, or whether it's you're just picking best player available at this point. I'm not as concerned about picking D early unless a guy like Kale McCarr or Roman Yossi falls into my lap in a Bangers Cats league. I mean, not as much as I am in a points league. In a points league, I like to take D a little bit early, but yeah, in a Bangers Cats, not so much, because I feel like there's a lot more value that comes from defense lower in the draft, because there's guys that aren't necessarily on power play one that bring other elements and other statistical can fill other statistical categories. So what do you think about that, Mark?
Uh, I'm right there with you. I will fade defenseman in a points league when given the chance, and so it's just that goes on steroids in a cats league for the reasons you're saying. You can get guys later in the draft that can contribute a bunch of things like hits and blocks, and really fill out those categories for you. I'll leave my skaters to get the goals and assists, and then sorry, my forwards to get the goals and assists, and I'm happy to take defensemen late. In fact, I think in this draft I'm going to try to pull off a pretty extreme D fade, and it'll be a bit of a game of chicken. And if I push it too far, it's not going to work perfectly. But I'm going to be fading defense pretty hard in this draft.
Zero D, zero G. That's Mark's MO. So I'm just gonna go to the comments right now. There's a lot of comments about Darlene going before Kale McCarr. So that is an interesting choice. That was Z Fed that took him on the turn before McCarr. I have Darlene for a fairly high projection. I know Nate does as well. I still would probably go McCarr over Darlene at this point, but it's not as insane in a Bangers Cats as you would think. Darlene does a lot across the board.
I will say that I was surprised when I put my spreadsheet together for this mock draft. I would agree that Darlene is actually the top defenseman in this format. There's not much separating him from McCarr. In a regular points league like the draft we did the other night, definitely McCarr is number one. But I was a bit surprised to see Darlene ranked number one, so I support that pick.
Connor Bedard in round 4, interesting pick. I like that as well. I think Bedard's probably going to be a point per game player this year. I mean, similar to what he was last year, but hopefully he stays a little bit more healthy. Victor Hedman going there. There are a lot of D going at this point. I'm not feeling a ton of urgency to pick one yet. Yeah, and let's go. There's a bit of a discussion about Mo Sider getting power play one with elite peripherals. I don't think that he is. Man, they've just shown in the past that they're not super stoked about having Mo Sider playing on that power play. So I'm not convinced. And also, why do you bring in Eric Gustafson, a very similar player to Shane Gostisbehere, who got the majority of the power play time for defense last year? It just seems like he's going to slot right into power play one. But there may be a bit of a split time situation there. They don't really know what they like doing. Detroit had a bit of a split power play last year, but I am of the opinion that it's going to be more of a heavy power play one this year because, again, like Carolina, they have a lot less depth. They lost guys like Daniel Sprong, David Perron. There was another guy that played on the Robbie Fabry, guys that would typically play on the power play. They didn't really replace them with anyone. So I feel like they are going to load up that top power play. I am back up again. Sidney Crosby, Tage Thompson go there with the last couple picks. This gets a little bit interesting here. So there are a number of options, a lot of centers. There is a guy here that my projection was very high on, but I'm not sure. I feel like I can push him a little bit later in the draft. I think what I'm going to do now is go with Sasha Barkov. Big fan of him. That's my first center off the board. Mark, what are you going to do here?
I'm going to cave and I'm going to take one of these centers that's been loitering at the top of my list here. I'm going to take Jack Eichel. Again, it's not. Trocheck was right there beside Eichel in my projections.
Yeah.
It's not too clear what's going to happen with Marchessault moving on, but I think he's the focal point of that team. He's going to be put in positions to succeed, and with any luck, he'll be great this year. I just want to quickly go back to the Moritz Seider pick because that's another guy that gets boosted way up in my projections for this format. He's actually the fourth-ranked defenseman in my projections. And so my projections are 100% based on what's happened in the past. And in the past, he's not had power play one. So or not exclusively anyway. So I think he's pretty valuable, even if he doesn't play power play one in this format. And if he were to get it, I mean, that's just a little bit of upside for Seider.
For sure.
All right, I need to be planning out my next move here. I've got 4 picks in the book so far. Wings, the focus as usual. I do have one center. I know I said that I was going to do a pretty hard defade, but I've actually got a defenseman who is starting to drift up to the top of my list, and so I could just pick him on merit. It wouldn't even be trying to construct some sort of value over a replacement pick. So there he goes.
Yeah, that's a good pick there. Charlie McAvoy going at 5-1 to Jackie G buckets. So that was your guy, hey?
That was the guy that was starting to drift up onto my list here, and I could have just taken him on merit. So it looks like the hard defade might be back on. Although we'll see what happens in the next few picks, because actually I do see another defenseman slowly making his way up here. And the other choices are, again, just a bunch of players that are center only. So we'll see how this plays out here, but I might end up going with a defenseman. Let me just pull up his stats here, my little lookup tool.
I'll say something about Charlie McAvoy. He's again another example of a guy whose values boosted a little bit in a Bangers Cats. He's not necessarily like a power play guy or like a big point getter on the back end, but you can take him early because he has a bit more of a peripheral floor. But unlike Seider, he does have a pretty safe spot on that top power play in Boston. So I actually like him. I mean, Seider does a little bit more in terms of the hits and blocks, but McAvoy is a little bit more interesting offensively. All right, Mark, what are you going to do here? You're on deck. Actually, you're on the clock now.
I'm on the clock, and so the top of my list is Nichushkin, who is left wing, right wing on Colorado. I would love the guy, but I've just reached the point where I can't do that with him this early. I've been drafting him religiously for the last couple of seasons, and I've just been bit too many times. So I do have a defenseman who's actually drifted up near the top of my list. And rather than take one of these centers who are hanging out below Nichushkin, I'm going to take Mike Matheson.
Ooh, Mike Matheson's a good pick. I think at this point, I gotta go with my boy. Whenever he's available, I gotta pick him up. And we're mid fifth round. I'm gonna go with Dougie Hamilton. I'm still pretty high on him. I don't know that he's necessarily going to be a smash to get power play one, although I feel like he should be in New Jersey. They seem to really like Luke Hughes there. I think Dougie Hamilton is the choice, but you know. I'm not the coach. I'm not Sheldon Keefe, and I didn't always agree with everything that Sheldon Keefe said. Owen Tippett goes next. That's a pretty good pick at this point. I think he could potentially have a really nice season. Yeah, and let's go back to the chat. We've got Uri Slavkovsky going off the board. Jamiano JN says, ooh, Slav, I like it. 60 plus points and a hit per game. Yeah, I mean, I've got him for 63 points in my projections. Mark, how are you feeling about Slavkovsky? I feel like he was a guy that was on your radar before he popped off at the end of the year last year.
Yeah, he was. I picked him up in the 18 Skaters League, and he was great for me. I've pulled him up in my skater lookup tool that I've got here, and so my projections, unfortunately, have him basically doing almost exactly what he did last year. So my projections are based on what's happened over the last 2 years, and really, he's only sort of broken out for half a season, and so. If I had to take the over or the under on this projection, I would definitely be taking the over. So I've got him projected for 21 goals, 28 assists. I think he can easily exceed that. So, and just let me quickly pull up where he's ranked. I've got him ranked a little bit lower for this format, even though he is pretty solid and hits and blocks. Just because the projection hasn't quite caught up with where he might be. He's a bit of a drag on goals, assists, and shots in my model, but I don't mind the pick.
Awesome. So we got Josh Morrissey going at 5'11", Chris Kreider on the turn to Z-Fed. And I mean, Josh Morrissey's a pretty nice pick at this point too. I think. I know you still have you stuck to your? Oh no, you took Mike Matheson last round, so it's not quite 0D. Yeah. So what am I gonna do with my next pick? I do have a couple guys in mind here. There's one guy that I seem to get on almost every single team that I have, for better or worse. And I'm not going to talk about him right now because I feel like someone's going to steal him. Matt Barzal on the turn. I was chirping Blake during his last stream about Matt Barzal and taking him in the 5th round. And then I did his projection last night, and it came out way higher than I was expecting. So I'm actually a little bit higher than on Matt Barzal than I thought. He really upped his shots last year. And I feel like even with the addition of Anthony Duclair, I think that'll only help him 5v5 at the very least. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, well, I took Bo Horvat in the points mock draft that we did the other day. Same sort of thinking, I think. I mean, my model's telling me what it thinks, but yeah, I think maybe the New York Islanders, or at least some of the players on the New York Islanders, might not be quite so bad and might defy that sort of stereotype that you might have in your mind.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I did a few projections. I did Bo Horvat as well. Anthony Duclair. Although Duclair, I don't foresee him getting power play one time. Kevin Fiala going in the 6th round. That's pretty surprising. I'm surprised he was still on the board there. So yeah, I think that, but I feel pretty good about Matt Barzal and Blake. I'm sorry for shit talking you in the comments the other night. Led Bang says Dougie is so good they better play him. I 100% agree. I've got him even with him splitting, even with him and Luke Hughes splitting the power play slightly. I got Dougie taking probably 60% of power play one time. Luke Hughes the other 40%. I still have him projected for over 60 points. So I feel pretty good about that. I am on the clock again. I am going to go with Travis Konechny here. I think he does a little bit of everything. He shoots a ton. I really like his spot in Philly. John Tortorella is a big fan, so I am naturally a big fan. Mark, what are you going to do here?
Well, what I was going to do is take Travis Konechny.
Awesome.
So that was just a straight
Love to
snake
see
right
it.
there. Uh, I've got another guy that I kind of like here, but I feel like he might come back, so I'm not going to do that yet. These other choices are, could go in a few different directions. Maybe I'll take a guy that's been getting a little bit of buzz, Alex Tuck.
Ooh, Alex Tuck. I love that pick.
Yeah, Nate and Blake have been talking him up. Sounds like you're pretty happy about it too. What do you
Yeah,
think he's going to do this year?
I haven't been on the mic talking about my projection of him yet, but with that Buffalo, when I looked more into the Buffalo top six, they shoot so much. All of them are huge shooters. I've got Alex Tuck for 30 goals, 75 points, so a bit of a bounce back this year. I'm a really big fan of Tuck, and always kind of have been. Got a little bit hurt by him last year because I picked him a little bit early, kind of expecting Buffalo to pop, and it did not go very well for me. But I do expect him to bounce back, just like Nate and Blake have said. What are your thoughts? I guess you picked him at this point, so you
I
must be
did.
relatively high.
It worked out. I mean, I've got him projected, or my model has him projected for about 70 points, and it does like a vibe adjustment, which projects it sort of separately based on environment. So it sort of compares the player's on ice environment over the past 2 years, basically, to the current team environment, and minimal vibe adjustment, which I don't know, you might find a little bit surprising given just how up and down Buffalo has been. So yeah, I'm looking at 29 goals, 40 assists, and he'll provide some hits and blocks as well, which of course is valuable. Uh, I don't know what type of time on ice he's going to get. My model's actually projecting him for half a minute less than he got last year. So if he just repeated time on ice from last year, then there's a bit of upside, perhaps on top of this projection. So yeah, I don't mind him, and of course he's right wing, and I like my right wingers when you can get them.
Of course, of course. Wyatt Johnston went at 6'11" to Timmy Stew. That's another example of a guy that I think probably has a little bit less value in a Bangers Cats league. He does shoot a lot, obviously. He's going to score a lot of goals, but we don't know exactly what his spot in the lineup is. So there is a little bit more risk, I would say, because he doesn't really do the hits and blocks so much. So I do think that Wyatt Johnston is a good pick at this point. But yeah, there is a little bit more risk in a Bangers Cats, definitely, than there would be in a points league, in my opinion, at the very least.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on Wyatt Johnston in this format?
Well, to be honest, I'm also a little bit hesitant on him in just a straight up points league. I think he's going to be a great player eventually. I'm just not. I just need a little bit more of a proven record before I'm prepared to really buy in. And so, uh, we'll see what he does this year. Hopefully, he'll be fantastic. But I don't think I'm going to have him anywhere just because he's going a bit earlier than I'm willing to take him. All right, I'm back on the clock here. I can go one of two ways. Um, I feel like the top winger, dual eligible on my list right now, could come back to me. Um, but I'm just going to take him anyway because uh, he's dual
Ooh,
eligible and plays on a team that has a fantastic schedule, and he does just a little bit of everything for this kind of setup. So I'm gonna take Frank Vitrano.
yeah, I'm pretty high on Vetrano too. My projections have him essentially repeating what he did last year, so I like that a lot. He does a little bit of everything, and that's really nice value for him. I cannot let this guy go any further. I know he had a tough year last year, but I see him bouncing back at least a little bit. It's my second center in the draft. This is Mika Zibanejad. Plays on the Rangers power play. I just see him having a bit of a bounce back here. Let's go into the chat a little bit. Fired Up Fantasy Hockey is here. What's going on, buddy? Sabres Power Play 1 guys are value meals this season. That's a comment on your Alex Tuck pick. I 100% agree. I think that power play is going to pop again. Optic Yami says, Mark got me 3 times. So you are sniping the shit out of Optic Yami here, Mark.
Beauty.
That's great. And Zach F, actually, I didn't even see this comment before I picked Zibanejad, but he said, Zach F says, Zib's still there after round 6. Wow. I 100% agree. That's essentially what I just said. So that's great. Alex DeBrincat goes at 7-8. That's a guy that I keep forgetting about, to be honest. He was a few years ago, I probably would have picked him in like the 3rd round in a Bangers Cats, but he's kind of his hit numbers have definitely decreased. His ice time is not I mean, I do think again, I said this about Detroit earlier, I do think they're going to load up their power play because I just don't think that they have a lot of offensive options other than the top 4 guys in Raymond, to bring Kit, Kane, and Larkin. I just don't see them like mixing in JT Compher and Andrew Kopp and guys like that. Like that's just not. I don't think that that's a viable way of doing things. So I really think that they are going to load up the top power play this year. It's a bit of a hot take, but I mean, we never seem to really know what Detroit is doing. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that, Mark?
Yeah, I have no idea what Detroit is doing. I've been assured that Steve Yzerman is a brilliant GM, but I'm not. I'm questioning the direction the team is going in. But
Yeah, I'm not so sure.
I like Dylan Larkin. He's not an elite player, but he's very, very solid. They've got some other nice pieces. They got to put him out there to score, and I don't know. It's not a team that I'm overly excited about, unfortunately.
Yeah, fair enough. Jacob Truba goes at 7-11. I'm not incredibly concerned about his ice time. I feel like there was a bit of an injury last year. I know there's the drama with them trying to trade him and the whole thing about his wife being a resident in New York and all that stuff. But I do think that he's probably going to be fine this year, and that makes him a really nice Bangers Cats player. So nice job there. Hard days and nights. And yeah, we're still rolling. I've got a few different players that I have in mind here. I don't know. At this point in the draft, I'm still going with relatively safe picks, but guys that I have strong opinions about in terms of that may be slightly controversial. And I'll kind of dive into that once I make one of these picks. But Nico Hischier goes at the turn to Zfed.
He was going to be my pick if he made it back to me, but no luck. So I like that pick.
Yeah, Hischier in the 7th round is very nice. Erik Karlsson at 8-1 to Zfed as well. Erik Karlsson, I think, will probably have a nice offensive rebound this year. I hope so, at least. Like they got to figure out that Pittsburgh power play. It's just it doesn't make any sense really. Although Erik Karlsson historically not really a power play merchant. He's definitely a 5v5 guy. So I don't know. We'll see. Quentin Byfield goes to Hard Day's Night. Heiskanen to Optic Yami. Aaron Ekblad was going to be my pick. Nice snipe there, Rob. Aaron Ekblad, I think, is going to have a big year this year. I see him just getting opportunity by default just now that Brandon Montour is out of the picture and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He just seems like the natural fit on Power Play 1, and I think he's probably going to rebound. Maybe not to the level that Aaron Ekblad was at. I mean, 3-4 years ago, where he was getting around 70 point pace, but I could see him getting 55-60 points this year, and with some nice peripherals, including shots. Brandon Montour goes to Face-Off Ninja. I am going to go with, at this point, we do have a couple of skater spots, so I'm not as concerned about taking another center only, so I'm going to go with Nazem Kadri at this point. Kadri, I think, is the number 1 center in Calgary, and he was the number 1 scoring target last year, and I think it'll be similar this year again. What are your thoughts on Kadri? I guess I'll let you pick first, and then we can talk about that.
Sure. So even though I announced that I was going to do a hard D fade, basically I've got a couple of defensemen here that have drifted up to the top of my list, and so I think it just makes sense to take one. Um, they're Jacob Chikrin and Seth Jones. Um, I think I got to go Seth Jones just because a little bit more sure of the power play upside with him. But I think Jacob Chicken would also provide value even if he didn't get the power play. So,
I 100% agree. I think Seth Jones is a great pick at 8-7. Connor Hellebuck, that is our first goalie off the board at
oh
8
boy.
8. I'm actually a little bit surprised that it took this long, but in an Apples and Genos mock draft with people from our Discord, not super surprising. So Connor Hellebuck, I think he's probably the obvious first choice if you're going with a goalie. I haven't really looked at. I haven't made goalie tiers yet. I am planning on doing that at some point once I'm done my projections, just kind of tiering goalies. But I do think Hellebuck is a pretty safe bet. Shesterkin goes. We're on a goalie run here. Dream killer. Going with Igor Shesterkin. Nick Suzuki to dead precedent. Not a big fan of Suzuki and a Bangers Cats. I'm going to be totally honest with you, Mark. I am a little bit higher on the Montreal Canadiens this year, but I don't think Suzuki is going to. I feel like he's kind of already hit his ceiling in terms of points. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Uh, I mean, I like the team being a little bit better than it has been in the past. Let me just
Yeah,
pull up Suzuki's projection in my tool here. Oh dear. Okay. Well, yeah. The model is thinking that he's going to take a bit of a step backwards from last year. Last year, 33 goals. My model has him at 27 goals,
yeah,
and I mean he's always sort of scored more goals than you might really think he should have. But
yeah.
the vibes adjusted numbers all the way down to 25 goals. Well, that's a pretty big step back. As for assists, 39 instead of 44. Vibe adjusted all the way down to 36. So the model is not too excited about Nick Suzuki, unfortunately.
I actually do have him at 28 goals as well, so not too far off of your goal projection. I do have
Yeah,
his
very
assists
like.
still
Sorry, go ahead.
relatively all right. I kept his IPP relatively similar, so I have him at 74 points next year. Like fairly similar to what he's been getting the last couple of years. I do think he's going to play with Slavkovsky and Caulfield, and they're both. I mean, Slavkovsky, I think, will probably pop, and I think Caulfield's going to have a bit of a shooting percentage positive regression season. Sorry, man. Let's go, Mark. You're on the clock.
I am on the clock, and my this is actually hilarious. Chikrin has made it back to me, and so now I'm presented with the possibility of actually not doing a D fade, but loading up on D relatively early. I feel like a lot of the other forwards that I have will come back. So plan B is draft defense early and often. Jacob Chikrin.
That's a major bummer. That he was at the top of my queue basically since my last pick, so
That's
not super
payback
thrilled
for
about that.
Konechny then.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. That's fair. I'm gonna go at this point with a guy that typically falls in these situations. Doesn't really do a lot of hits and blocks, but I do like him for shots and goals. So I'm gonna go with Brock Nelson. He's center, left wing eligible. And now I'm kind of doing a D fade, to be honest. I mean, we talked about that off the hop. I only have one defenseman right now, so that's something that I'm going to have to rectify at some point. But that's all right.
I've got a long
I'm
list
pretty.
of guys that you can draft at the end if you want.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I was prepared for the last rounds just to load up on D, but it's not how it's happening.
No, I definitely have a few guys in mind, but Bo Horvat goes next. I mean, we talked about him. That's two Islanders right in a row. Brock Nelson, what do I have him projected for? I just did it last night. Nelson, I have him for 33 goals, 68 points, 234 shots. Pretty happy with that. Bo Horvat, I've got him for 34 goals, 69 points, which is very nice. I don't know. You said you were relatively high on Bo Horvat. What are your thoughts there?
I love him in the ninth round.
Yeah.
Let me just see if I can pull him up in my tool here. Horvat. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I've got him. You can sort of expect him to do what he did last year, if you believe my model. And what he did last year was not too bad. And to be picking him up in the ninth round seems like great value.
Yeah, 100% agree. Jason in the chat says, "Holy man, again sniped me." I'm assuming that's about me taking Brock Nelson. I'm gonna be honest. If I had done projections and I actually had my ranks, I probably would have taken Bo Horvat first. So just kind of lost him in the Fantrax world here. We've got a couple of guys that normally go earlier in the draft. I guess Mark Scheifele. This is around the time that he's usually drafted. That's a nice pick by Rob there. Rupe Hintz to Optic Yami. He's another guy that I think his value drops in a banger's catch just because he's kind of more of an efficiency guy than a counting stats guy. Doesn't do a lot peripherally, doesn't shoot a ton, but does score capitalizes on his opportunities. So in this format, not as much value. Pavel Buchnevich goes next, a guy that's criminally underappreciated in my opinion. Gets injured a fair bit, but I do think that he has a decent amount of value. Thomas Hertel from the Vegas Golden Knights, going to ZFed at 9-12. Nate says, "Get this yellow off my screen." We're trying, Nate. We stopped. There's 4 goalies taken so far, but we've kind of settled it down. I feel like that first tier of volume starters are now off the board. Hellebuyck, Shesterkin, Saros, Bobrovsky. We will see what happens next. Mark, are you going 0-0-0 G?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure that it's totally an appropriate strategy in this case.
Yeah.
There's what, 5 skater or forward, skater stats and 3 goalie stats. I think you could probably pull it off, but at the same time, even if you don't draft a goalie and you change your mind partway through the season and you want to take advantage of something in free agency, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. So just for the sake of this exercise, I'm going 0-0-0, and I'll just talk about skaters. I will point out that in this format, it is pretty heavily volume based for goaltenders. So
Right.
it's not too difficult to figure out the type of goaltender you should be going for. A goalie that plays a lot of games on a good team is probably a good choice if you want to go in that direction.
So Nugent Hopkins, another guy that specifically in this format is probably not super valuable. So 10th round Nugent Hopkins is not incredibly surprising because we're not including power play points in this specific one. Vasilevsky and Sorokin going off the boards. Nate, I'm sorry, I tried. We've got a question from Jason. Who do you think has Vegas's top power play? I haven't really analyzed it yet, but I imagine you've got Hertel, Jack Eichel, just off the top of my head, Mark Stone, and I don't know. I don't know who the other one is. I'll have to look at their depth chart here. I'll pull it up once my next pick is done. We can kind of have a quick discussion about that. We've got Sorokin, Faceoff Ninja, goes with Chris Letang. He was one of the guys that I was going to pick here. I'm just going to go for straight peripherals right now. I need to pick a D. I'm going to go Radko Gudas in the 10th round. I think that's okay for Gudas. I saw Jeremy Lozon went pretty early in the 6th round. So I'm pretty happy with Radko Gudas, I think, at this point. So Mark, what are you doing here?
I'm tempted to go in a couple different directions. Got my eye on a player that might make it back to me. And so, oh man, it's tough. I'm also looking at how my team makeup is starting to build out, and I could really use some assists. But you know what? I think I'm going to go Brian Rust.
Ooh, I like that pick a lot. I think Brian Rust will probably get on that top Pittsburgh power play along with Michael Bunting, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Erik Karlsson.
Yes.
I like that. I like that a lot for Brian Rust. So I think that's a great pick at this point. Gus Nyquist going at 10-8. What are your thoughts on Michael Bunting. I know it's kind of taboo to talk about a guy before he's drafted here, but what are your thoughts about his production? I haven't done Pittsburgh yet, so I'd like to hear what your
All right.
model is spitting out on Bunting.
Yeah, sure. I've pulled them up here in my lookup tool. So goals, expecting him to put up a few more than last year. I've got him for 24 goals. Assists, a little bit less. He had 36 last year. My model has him for 30. His peripherals are about the same. It's projecting him time on ice to be identical to last year for whatever reason. So, in terms of where that puts him in rank, let me just. I guess I do have him ranked as a player who you might not pick just yet in this format. Basically, he's a minus player in every stat except for goals. Using the Z scores. So he's got a positive Z score of 0.34 for goals, but then across the board everything else is a negative. So not super strong perhaps in this format.
We've got a nice little run here. We got Elias Lindholm going to Dead Precedent, Mark Stone to Dream Killer, Lucas Raymond, Sam Bennett, Sam Bennett, Boone Jenner at the turn that's an absolute killer. Jackie G Buckets, I love that.
Yeah, Boone Jenner's the player I was hoping was going to come back to me, so now I've got to come up with a new plan.
Yeah, those are two guys that in a Bangers Cats, if you're fading centers, you can absolutely crush picking one or both of those guys up in this situation, and be pretty happy that you waited on centers. Alexi Lafreniere going to Timmy Stew. I do like Lafreniere for this year, and he hits a little bit. Is shooting more than he ever has, and I really love that line of Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere. They really popped last year. They seem to really have nice chemistry. Vinny Tro, I have him for a career high in points this year, just slightly higher than what he had last year. But I do think that what he did is reproducible. So it's a nice little environment for Lafreniere to flourish potentially even further. Matthias Ekholm going to Dead President. Mark, what are your thoughts now? Are you scrambling? I can feel the temperature increasing from through the screen. What's going on?
I was hoping to pick up Boone Jenner. That's not an option anymore. All right, I'm on the clock. I've actually got two more defensemen sitting right at the top of my list. I'm pretty confident I can pick them up later, though, so I'm going to hold off. I think just looking at the options and what's coming up, there's still lots of good defensemen for fading D. So I think I'm going to pick up another player who I picked up in the points league draft. Dual eligible, good schedule. Trevor Moore.
Ooh, Trevor Moore. He kind of fills the stat categories as well.
So I've got him.
You
I've got
go
him
ahead. Go
as
ahead.
I've got him as a plus player for goals, shots, and hits. He's a little bit of a minus in assists and, not too surprisingly, blocks, but he does provide some blocks. So he's not a complete black hole there. And that's taking into account, like last year he scored 31 goals. My model doesn't think he's going to do that again. My model has him at 26 goals. But at 26 goals, he's providing value here. Anyway, you're on the clock. Go ahead.
So I just picked Jake Sanderson. That's my third defenseman off the board. I don't love him in a Bangers Cats, but he at this point in the draft, I'm trying to pick some D. And he seems like he's one of the guys that's going to get probably the most ice time. You've got Jacob Chikrin out of town, and I think he's pretty much they pretty much let everyone know that he's their top power play option. Like that's the guy that they want to be playing on their top power play. So he's going to get some offensive time. And he gets blocks. He's not really a big hitter, but he does block a little bit. So I'm okay with Jake Sanderson at that point. I don't know, man. Like I'm not like, I mean, he's kind of a better real world player than he is fantasy player, but I do think that he does have a little bit of value just in terms of getting lots of ice time. So Marty Natchez and Nikolai Ehlers going with the next two picks. Mark, Jake Sanderson, what are your thoughts about him?
Uh, it's tough to say what's going to happen there. They've been pretty loyal to Shabbat, but it does at the same time feel like Sanderson might have his moment here. I'm just pulling him up in my tool, and basically it's saying you can expect him to be, very comparable to what he did last year, a little bit better on the assist front, but otherwise very comparable to what he did last year. So if you were happy with what he did last year, then you should be happy with what you'll get this year. I mean, of course, that doesn't really factor in the potential upside if he were to take the power play and run with it. You could obviously see a nice uptick in his goals and assists.
Jake DeBrusk just went at 11-10 to Optic Yami. I think he's going to be one of these guys that's going to be a steal late in drafts. I think people are he's not on a lot of people's radar. And I think that I think that he's in a good spot in Vancouver. I could see him playing on the top power play there as the fourth forward. They've kind of been looking for that other guy to go with Pedersen, Besser, and JT Miller. And I think Jake DeBrusk is a guy that could potentially play right in front of the net. So Rich asks, Mark, will your projections be available through the A&G Patreon, or do you have your own site, Mark?
My projections are not currently publicly available, and I'm going back and forth in my head as to whether I will release them. I've released them in the past, and nobody paid attention to them. And so my strategy last year was just to keep them to myself and try to win fantasy hockey leagues with them. This year, I may put them back out again. I do have a Patreon site where I would put them. If I do put them there, they'll be free for public access. I make everything available to the public through there. And if I do decide to do that, I'll post it on Twitter, X, and no doubt in the Discord as well.
Mark is a philanthropist at heart. He's just giving back to the community. Tom Wilson goes at 12-3 to Optic Yami. That's a nice little pick. Gets a ton of hits. I don't know that his offensive upside is super high anymore, but he probably will play a good amount of minutes. He's a pretty big part of that team, so may even get a top power play spot. Although you picked Jacob Chychrun. My opinion is, and I've had this for a little while, I know when free agency first happened and the trade went down where he went to Washington, I was like, this guy is just never going to get PP1. And then I had an epiphany and I was like, yes, he is. He's going to play with John Carlson. He's going to play on that other flank. He's got such a bomb of a shot. If they put Jacob Chychrun, and like they may not do this, but I think this is what they should do. You put Jacob Chychrun on the opposite flank of Ovechkin. I think that is an absolutely appropriate weapon to put on that side, so that you're not just feeding Ovechkin every single time, although they still will because they're trying to get him the goals record. But I do think that it could create a little bit more space for Ovechkin. Right now I'm going Justin Falk at 12-6 for my fourth defenseman. We've got Torrey Krug. The reports coming out saying that he is potentially not going to play this year. And if he does, it may be a bit of a delayed start. So I think Justin Falk is probably going to be their power play one guy. And he does some pretty nice things peripherally as well. So I'm pretty happy with Justin Falk at this point. Mark, what are you doing now?
Well, I'm in the uncomfortable position of having two defensemen sitting at the top of my queue. So I'm just going to take one of them, Sean Dursey, and my hard D fate is not going to be. I've now got 4 defensemen by the 12th round, which is not something I was planning on doing.
That's all right. That's all right. I mean, that's part of drafting, right? Is your plans change depending on how the chips fall? Like that's kind of my that's kind of the way I play things. I have a loose strategy, but it changes depending on what happens. Blake says hard D fade giggity. Classic Blake. Uh, oh, we've got a Matvey Mishkov's sighting
There
at
we go.
in the 12th round. That's interesting. I don't know in a bangers cats that I would be super stoked about taking Mishkov. I don't know. I mean, obviously, uh, there's not a ton of information on peripherals, but yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy that you can definitely take a swing on late in drafts because I think he's probably going to play relatively high in the lineup, unless your opinion is that John Tortorella is going to play him in the bottom six and teach him how to shot block, which he's been known to do with young players. I don't know, man. I'm hoping that situation works out for Mishkov, but we'll see. What do you think?
Well, in terms of points, I mean, from what I gather, I mean, I've never watched him play, and I don't profess to be a prospects expert, but it seems like he could be in store for a lot of points, absent the torts factor. I have no idea what his peripherals are going to be like, which are important for this type of league. But yeah, I am a little bit worried about just what's going to happen under torts as he's taught how to play hockey the right way, and it could be rough, but who knows? Maybe it'll be great. Fingers crossed.
Fabian Zetterlund. Are you pretty high on him? I feel like you picked him in one of the mock drafts.
Yeah, I did. I picked him in the second to last round. I think. I mean, I'm not super high on him. He's a guy that you pick up at the end of the draft. But by the end of the year, last year in San Jose, I think he was pretty clearly the team's best winger. And so hopefully that just rolls over into next season. Obviously, they've added a few more pieces there. And, a guy like Toffoli is going to be given chances to score as well. But yeah, I like Zetterlund. For late in the draft, I think he's a great pickup. And in this kind of format, he does provide some nice peripherals as well. So he's a good guy to have. He was starting to get pretty close to the top of my queue.
Patrick Kane, Claude Giroux. Patrick Kane this late in the draft is pretty crazy
God.
too. Mark,
All right.
what are you doing here?
I'm on the clock, and the other defenseman who was at the top of my queue is still there. I'm not surprised because everybody hates this guy, but I'm just going to take him. I bet I could wait even longer, but this will be my last defenseman of the draft. It's Alex Pietrangelo.
Oh wow.
I still like the guy. I don't care if Hannafin is there. I don't care if Theodore is there. Theodore's been there for years, and Pietrangelo has been decent. So, maybe I'm just too slow to accept that Pietrangelo is on his way out. But in the 13th round of a 16-round draft, I need some of these guys to fail anyway to just churn through streamers, and so I'm happy to take them. You're on the clock. What have you got?
I'm on the clock here. I could go a couple different ways, but I think I'm going to go back to forward. I'm going to go Jake Neighbors here. I think he's a guy that could get a fairly good offensive situation in St. Louis. They don't have a ton of depth, and he spent some time on the top power play last year. And he's a guy that hits a lot. So I like Jake Neighbors at this point. Rob says, I accidentally stacked a bunch of teammates face palm. Let's just take a look at Rob's team here. We've got what teammates are we talking about? Is it Winnipeg? Yeah. Kyle Connor. We got Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Nikolai Ehlers. I mean, I don't hate that. Like if you could have gone with worse stacks, but it's certainly not the best. I don't know. What do you think about that, Mark? What do you think about that strategy?
I will say that Winnipeg does have an okay schedule. So if you're going to stack players from a team, you don't want it to all be guys who will be playing on heavy nights. So from that perspective, it's all right. I mean, having three players from three scoring forwards from one team definitely can put you in a tough spot depending on the schedule or, if they just go cold. So it's probably not an ideal strategy, but also might not be fatal.
we've got Matt Roy and Brent Burns going off the board here. What are your thoughts on Burns, man? Like, is he completely washed? Is he completely off power play one now? What are we thinking with Brent Burns? I'm not incredibly high on him, but obviously in the 13th round, he's definitely going to still bring you some value, but not incredibly high on Brent Burns this year. What do you think?
No, I'm not too high on him either. Just pulled him up in my little lookup tool here. So last year he scored 10 goals. My model actually thinks he should be uh, on pace for 11 next year. He had 33 assists last year. Model's predicting 31. So from that perspective, basically the model is saying that you should expect him to do what he did last year, which is a little bit surprising given his age. And my model does definitely punish older skaters, and he's an older skater. So a little bit surprised that it's not punishing him even more heavily. But, you might have a 40-point player there. Uh, I just feel like the downside is down. He might not get a whole lot of power play time, and age is going to catch up with him at some point. But
Yeah,
as you say, at the end of the draft, he's a guy that you can take a shot on, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think the floor is pretty low on Brent Burns, which is a little bit scary. And Shane Goss to spare playing on the top power play. I think, yeah, I mean, he was there in the past. Like I think Carolina is bringing him back to play there. It's very similar to what they did with Tony DeAngelo. They're like, this is a guy that has worked here before. Obviously, didn't work out with Tony DeAngelo the second time around, but I think Goss is more of a sure bet. I like him a lot more than D'Angelo in general. Thatcher Demko off the board. We still don't actually have that many goalies. We had a Swayman Ottinger back to back at one point, but we're still kind of on those first couple tiers of volume starters. Brandon Hagel goes to Rob. Brandon Hagel, I think, is a good spot. Blake thinks he's going to get power play one. I'm not entirely sure that that's true. They had Nick Paul playing net front last year, and I feel like they were pretty into that. Brandon Hagel got a good run the previous year, but in terms of recency, I feel like I mean, they could split time, but I think those are probably the two guys that they're going to be looking at there. I mean, just in terms of your general opinion, what do you think of that? Oh, I'm on the clock again here.
Yes, I'm also kind of scrambling, trying to figure out. I kind of lost track of the fact that I have some more picks coming up here, and I'm also noticing that I don't have any centers. I have faded centers to the point where I've only got one center on my roster at the moment, which it usually never works out that way. I see that you took Thomas Harley there. Why don't you talk about him while I try to figure out what I'm going to do here?
Yeah, Thomas Harley at this point, I'm a big fan of his. Doesn't Not like a crazy peripherals guy, but I think if you've got your 50, potentially getting 40 plus points without power play time, I think that's a pretty good situation. I'm pretty high on Harley. My projection for him, let me just pull it up really quick. I've got him for 10 goals, 43 or 44 points this year, and then with 140 blocks as well to boot. So I'm okay with that in the last few rounds in a Bangers Cats. Like I think he's going to bring lots of value. Mark, you took Gabe Velarde. Why don't you talk about him?
Well, his greatest virtue is that he plays center, which apparently I've completely neglected in this draft. Uh, let me let me just go to my skater lookup tool here and see what it has to say about this guy. Uh, all right. Okay, well, this is good to know. So the model's projecting that he's going to score 33 goals compared to his 38 goal pace last year, uh, 26 assists compared to his 24 goal pace last year, and then, some peripherals, nothing too exciting there. So, I sometimes take comfort when the model projects that the player will do less than they did the year before, but then still tells you that you're getting value at that draft position. It just makes me think that there's maybe a little bit of upside if they were to just simply repeat what they did last year, let alone get better. And I think he's going to get time in the top six there in Winnipeg and get some opportunities. And like I just mentioned, Winnipeg has an okay off night schedule,
Yeah.
so that's not bad when you're picking up players in the late round. You want to be able to get them on your roster. Of course, I can get them in my roster every night as a center because I don't have any. All right, and I've actually got another pick coming up here very quickly, and I'm not totally sure what I should be doing here. The top of my list has got a lot of wingers, which is, unusual. Usually, when you get to this point in the draft, you're just staring at a whole bunch of centers, and that's not the case here. So my plan has backfired a little bit. The top center, according to my model right now, is Ryan Hartman, and he's also dual eligible center right wing. I mean, I just can't be too enthusiastic about that pick, but when I'm looking down further on the list, I'm just not seeing centers that score particularly well, unfortunately. And I'm on the clock, so you know what? Perhaps, I mean, my model has him ranked 119, and we're at pick 174. I'm not at all confident that he is worth a 119 pick, but he's on my team, Ryan Hartman.
I
Over
do
to
think
you.
that there's some upside there because there is a chance that he still plays on the top line with Kaprizov and
There's a
Zuccarello,
chance.
and I think that like I don't think that Marco Rossi or Joel Eriksson Ek are necessarily a lock on that top line, and he has been there before and has had chemistry with them before. So he's not necessarily just going to have third line minutes. We have 2 picks left in this draft. I have 0 goalies. I'm going to go with one. I'm going to go UPL here. He's a guy that I think is going to get volume. I think Buffalo is going to be slightly better. In terms of the guys that are left over, he's probably the guy that I'm highest on. I'm just scrolling through just to remind myself. I haven't really looked at goalies very much in this offseason. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. UPL. Like it. Jacob Markstrom actually just went next. I probably should have gone with him, but that's okay. I don't know, man. Are you going to pick a goalie? You said you weren't, but.
No, there's no point right now.
I think we may have. Oh, no, never mind. It was just my screen. I thought we were glitching out there for a second. And our volume is back on for some reason here. There we go. I think that's better. Stu Skinner goes on the turn. Victor Arvidsson as well. Blake loves Victor Arvidsson. Optic Yami says Velarde. I need to be reminded of Velarde. Yeah, I think that was a good reminder. I'm pretty high on Velarde as well. You kind of said your piece there. Winter Alberio says forgot some of the schedule plays, so glad to practice too. Jamanio JN, I'd look at Provorov on the presumption that Werenski is always hurt. I don't know that he's necessarily the next man up on the power play in Columbus. I feel like they have a few options there. I don't know. I mean, they're not good ones. David Juracek, I think, is a guy that could potentially quarterback a power play that I think is going to get some 5v5 time at the very least this year. Dead Precedence 13 says, feeling like I made out pretty well with one pick to go. Well, there's still one pick, so things can still go downhill here. Dead Precedence. Tristan Jarry, Dakota Joshua, Leo Carlson. Leo Carlson's a great pick in the 16th round. He's going to get, I think, probably over 60 points this year. Dakota Joshua, obviously a guy that fills the stat categories. Jonathan Drouin to Rob, probably going to get that top power play in Colorado. My pick is coming up soon. I'm just taking a look here at goalies just to kind of round out my active spots, and Joseph Wall would have been the guy that I was going to go with, and Face Off Ninja took him. So Sniped once again. I think. I mean, there's a few guys that I look at here. Jordan Binnington, I think, is going to get some volume. Charlie Lindgren is interesting, but I could see him losing the starting spot. Obviously, like at this point in the draft, it doesn't really matter. You could just swap a goalie out without really feeling like you used a ton of draft capital. I'm going to go with Philip Gustafson. I think he'll get a decent run in Minnesota this year. And we're back to you, Mark, with your last pick of the draft.
All right, I might take a defenseman who's actually. Well, I've got two defensemen who have drifted up to the top of my board here that are kind of interesting, just because they're useful for this kind of league. Jake McCabe and Marcus Pettersson in Pittsburgh. Both of them play on teams with good schedules. I think maybe Pettersson. No, I'll take Jake McCabe. Jake McCabe's the guy.
Interesting. Yeah, McCabe's going to play a lot in Toronto. He's pretty much their number one shutdown guy.
Yeah.
And I think no matter who he plays with, I could certainly see Chris Tanev being his defense partner. Everyone talks about Tanev potentially playing with Morgan Riley on the top pair. I just don't see that being. I mean, it could be a good fit, but I don't know. I think by the end of the day, at least by the playoffs, I think McCabe and Chris Tanev are going to be the shutdown pair in Toronto. I think that's probably the best way to go. But yeah, and we're done. That's it. Let's open the draft board up here, and take a look at how we did here, Mark. We are side by side, dead center. All right, why don't you take me through your team and kind of highlight what you're high on and what you're not so high on.
All right, sure. Well, in the early rounds, you just sort of have to try to take the best players that are available, but keep an eye on position eligibility. And so I'm pretty stoked with Pasternak, Gensel, Svechnikov, Eichel. Those are all, very good players. This is where it starts to move into me picking a bunch more defensemen than I was really planning on doing, but they were available, and so I took them. Matheson, Tuck, Vetrano. Vetrano's a guy that I feel like you're going to be able to get for value this year in drafts, just because he doesn't really have a lot of name recognition, and people are going to say that he's not going to repeat what he did last year. And I think they're probably right. He probably won't repeat what he did last year, but what he will do this year is still pretty valuable. I'll just pause here and talk about my lookup for Vetrano. So he scored 37 goals last year. And so what's he going to do this year? Well, my model says 28 goals with the same number of assists. And so he still is going to provide value where you're going to be able to get him, I think, in a lot of leagues as a 30 goal scorer instead of something that's closer to a 40 goal scorer. And of course, the other things, the attributes that I love, dual eligible and plays on the best team in the league when it comes to off nights. So he's just a guy who's going to get in there, provides peripherals. He's a plus player across the board except for assists for this type of format. And so I think he's a sneaky pick that no one's really giving him any credit for what he did last year. And I think in some cases they might fail to properly value what he will actually do. Anyway,
his bash, as they say on Fantasy Hockey Life, is incredible. He's one of the best in the league in terms of forwards. I think he shoots a ton. I have him for 265 shots, 139 hits, and 80 blocks, which is just absolutely killer.
All right, well, I'll tell you what my model has, which is mostly very similar. So my model has him at 259 shots, 124 hits. So I think that's a little bit down from what you said, but still a very good number. And then 81 blocks, which is very close to what you said. So
yeah, awesome.
All right, so then back with more defensemen, Seth Jones. I think Nate has already talked about him a little bit, and yeah, I think again he plays on a bad team, and so people just sort of don't even want to think about him. But I think he's going to be just fine. Jacob Chikrin, he's already demonstrated that he can be valuable without getting power play. If he gets power play, that's just upside for him. And then starting to transition towards the bottom half of the draft here. Ryan Rust, he's probably going to be put in a position to succeed there in Pittsburgh. Trevor Moore, again, he probably won't repeat what he did last year, but I think he'll be just fine with what he will do. And he's got the dual eligibility, plays on a team that plays on off nights. So, great guy to be picking up later in your drafts, hopefully. Sean Dursey, not clear what his role is going to be when it comes to the power play there in Utah this year, but he's going to provide a ton of blocks and that type of thing, which will always be valuable in this format. Petrangelo, I already said too much about him during the draft. Until he totally just has a terrible season, I'm probably going to keep drafting him higher than other people. Just because I'm not really counting on him even to have big power play numbers to be valuable. And then just rounding it out with some guys who can actually play center in Velarde and Hartman. And the last pick is McCabe. That's all about getting his peripherals, obviously. And since I've got you here and you're a Toronto fan, you can tell me what you think about my model's projections for him. I'm thinking about the time on ice. How much you were talking about where you think he'll fit in the lineup. My model's got him projected for 20.3 minutes time on ice per night. And just to give you a reference as to what he did last year, he was at 20.7. So the model thinks he'll play a little bit less than last year, but still, I mean, you call that second pairing minutes, I think.
Yeah, that feels about right to me. I think he's second pair no matter what, because I think Riley is still going to be the minute muncher on that team. Um, he'll be the top pair no matter who he's playing with. So yeah, I think that's a good projection for him. He's not going to get any power play time, so he's got a few people in front of him now. He did occasionally have a little bit of time on the power play last year when there were injuries, but that's not a spot that you want to be in with Jake McCabe. He has okay offensive instincts, but yeah, no, but that does feel about right to me.
I mean, the model in terms of just the Z scores and whether he's plus minus. I mean, he's pretty heavily a minus player in the offensive stats. He's like 1.5 standard deviations negative for goals, 1.5 negative deviations for shots, only about half a negative standard deviation for assists. But his value is obviously coming from his peripherals. He's 2.7 positive for hits and 2.4 positive for blocks. So that's where all of his value is coming from, which is, I think, probably pretty obvious to everybody.
Definitely.
What about your team?
I'll go through my team. So I'm looking at it here. I think it's pretty clear to me looking at it that I did this completely blind. I am pretty happy, at least with the very top of my draft, though. I think Brady Tkachuk at 1.7 in a Bangers Cats. Like you want to have Brady Tkachuk. He's an absolute monster. William Nylander in the second round. I'm pretty happy with that. Does the shots, does the goals, does the overall points. Does a little bit of everything offensively, not a ton of periffs, but I like William Nylander there, and I'm pretty high on him getting at least close to 100 points again this year. Timo Meier, I have him for a big bounce back, getting into the 70, 75 point range. And then also kind of doing the shots, the hits, and everything that he does, and kind of going back to being like a Brady Tkachuk light. So I'm pretty high on Timo Meier. So getting him in the third round, I'm pretty happy with. Sasha Barkov in the fourth, also love that. He hit a little bit more this year than he has in the past. And obviously he's gonna put up points the way that he normally does. So I'm okay with him being my top center there. Dougie Hamilton in the fifth, not a ton of peripherals in terms of hits and blocks, but shoots more than most defensemen in the league. And I still see him getting 60, 65 points no matter what his power play situation is. So I like that a lot. I do think that he is going to find himself with some power play one time. Travis Konechny in the sixth. I think I'm really thrilled with that in a Bangers Cats. Obviously, sniped Mark there, as we mentioned before. But yeah, getting him as a right wing only is nice. And then Mika Zibanejad somehow fell to me in the seventh round. Hard to be upset about that. I see him bouncing back as well. Nazem Kadri, I could see him repeating around 70 points this year again. And obviously his hits have kind of decreased as his offensive role has become more significant on some of the teams that he's played in, but he's still a guy that shoots a ton and is going to get a ton of ice time. So the counting stats will probably be high. Brock Nelson in the ninth, I'm okay with that. I think, like I mentioned, I think if I had noticed that Horvat was still on the board, I probably would have taken him before Brock Nelson. But Nelson's always a guy that I'm looking for in like the 9th, 10th, 11th round because he's a guy that typically brings a ton of value and gets disrespected in drafts, even though he essentially does the same thing every year. Radko Gudas in the 10th. I mean, he's a Bangers Cats monster. He'll be behind Jeremy Lozon. He'll probably have the second most hits in the league. And then I talked a bit about Sanderson. Not incredibly thrilled with that pick, but in terms of what was left with I still think he's not in a bad situation. Justin Falk, I think he's going to be a bit of a sleeper this year just because he's going to get that power play time in St. Louis. And then another St. Louis Blue, Jake Neighbors. He had a bit of a breakout this year, and I could see him having a fine season next year and a guy that hits a decent amount. Thomas Harley, kind of said my piece on him. And then UPL and Philip Gustafson. I mean, you could do worse in goal. And if they falter, I mean, that's why you go 0G. You just drop them and move on to somebody else. So I'm okay with it. I'm not like a super fan of my D, but I kind of faded them unintentionally, to be honest, but I'm not incredibly upset. Yeah, I'm okay with it. I actually personally like your team better than mine, but yeah, I'm all right with it.
Well, you're on the record as being someone who likes to draft their defense early.
Yeah.
And so that's not really how it played out. And I can see why you wouldn't be feeling great about it. But, I've been a proponent for a while now of fading defense, and so it doesn't faze me at all. I think, like picking up a guy like Falk, I think could be a great pickup.
Yeah.
And so to get him in the 12th round, I think that's great. I somehow managed to get him literally in the last round of the points draft that we did the other night. I think with the news of Krug potentially being out for the season, people have all of a sudden sort of started to pay a bit more attention, and so Falk might start drifting up the draft boards. But even still, getting him in the 12th round, I think, could be pretty good for a league like this because he'll provide some nice peripherals as well. So,
yeah, it'll be interesting to see what his ADP is when everything kind of levels out. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with him in the 12th round. I'm looking at the comments, and yeah, Jason says, I believe Jason is Face Off Ninja. We had a snipe battle, me and Jason, back and forth. That was pretty fun. I actually kind of was feeling like you and I were going to snipe each other a little more, and that was actually it was not something that I had thought about. We put ourselves right in the middle of the draft on purpose, just so that we each would have time to talk and we'd kind of split things in half. But I like partway through, I was like, oh, we could just be sniping each other the whole time, which would be pretty fun content. But
yeah,
it did happen a few times.
I was kind of thinking it might happen a little bit more than it did, but there were two direct snipes at least, I think. So
yeah,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. Dead President said, had me sweating it out on Binner, Josh. I guess, yeah, it looks like Dead President's picked up Binner late in the draft. But yeah, I think that's all we got for tonight. I think we might as well shut things down. Yeah, check out our Discord. Check out the Patreon. Check out Mark's Patreon. It's patreon.com/18SKTRS. Is that right, Mark?
Take the valves out, which I think is what you did. I think there is one more announcement that we could make too, which if you're the kind of person who's stuck around this long, this will be interesting to you. I love doing these every year. I find it a lot more valuable than mock drafting personally, but Nate has informed us that the first best ball of the year will be starting up tomorrow. And the value from these things, as far as I'm concerned, is unlike in a mock draft where you're under the clock and have to make a pick in, say, 45 seconds like tonight, you've got a bit of time to really think about where the draft is going and, really make the best pick available. Um, which then you can, when the your drafts come around later in September or October or whatever, you've got a lot more experience in seeing how the drafts unfold and which types of players you want to grab at the different places in the draft. And it makes it a lot easier to make those types of decisions when you're actually on the clock. So plus if you enter more than one of them, you can sort of collect the data and have what might be a little bit more of an accurate ADP number than you'll find on Yahoo or whatever. So I highly recommend the best ball drafts. They're a lot of fun. If you don't know what the format is, I've actually written a little bit of an article that describes it. If you hit me up in the Discord, I can point you in that direction. It's published on the Apples and Ginos website. It's a really fun format. Basically, you just pick a team and then ride or die with it all year. No changes are made. The system automatically picks your best players for you. So it's no time commitment once the draft is done. And it's a really fun way to spend a little bit of time in the summer getting ready for your fantasy hockey season.
Yeah, man. I'm pretty pumped for it. So that does start tomorrow. Best ball number one. Nate will be sending out a message about that. If you want to get notifications when a new best ball league starts, head into if you're in the Apples and Ginos Discord server. If you're not, jump into the Discord server. Go to the channel Get Rolls, and there is a post by the bot at the top, and if you click the banana emoji, you will start getting best ball notifications. So you're going to want to go in and do that if you're interested in doing best balls. They are low stakes. It's $5 entry fee, but then if you win, you get money. So it's a fun little way to shake the drafting rust off with a little bit of skin in the game. So it is definitely a lot of fun. I enjoyed a lot too. All right. So that is definitely all that we have at this point. Again, check out that Discord, check out the Patreon. I dropped Mark's Patreon as well. Check us out on YouTube, like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're not, if you're listening in the audio feeds, stop right now, go to YouTube, like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. And follow us on X. I'm at just Josh41. Nate's at Apples Ginos. Mark is at 18 Skaters without vowels. And Blake is at Blake Creamer AG. Please practice safe stats and happy mock drafting and best balling. Have a good one, folks.